If you're going to be a serious grown-up person and appear to defend the Catholic Church in public in front of an educated and literate audience, you simply have to start by making a great number of heartfelt apologies and requests for contrition and forgiveness.
In my last video, I covered just how widespread and disgusting the Catholic Church's sex abuse scandal is and showed how the cover-up stretches all the way to the Vatican. The grand jury found evidence that over 300 priests had sexually abused more than 1,000 victims, and the church had systematically attempted to cover it up.
The grand jury reports the truth is bishops and other Catholic Church leaders covered up the crimes and obstructed justice in order to avoid scandal, and that the same leaders persuaded victims not to report the abuse and police officers not to investigate the abuse.
The philosophy was not to help children, but to avoid scandal.
This is hearsay.
This is Bill Donahue, president of the Catholic League. He's paid almost $500,000 a year to defend the Catholic Church. In spite of recent scathing reports of sex abuse by priests and widespread cover-up that was released by a Pennsylvania grand jury this month that led the Pope himself to apologize, Bill's come out swinging in defense of the priests and the Catholic Church.
We live in a time of hyperventilation, of where everything is overheated. Be very, very careful of some of these lay men and women who now are riding their high horse that they're going to resolve all the problems. They come to the table with their hands clean.
This lengthy report was written by 23 committed grand jurors based on extensive testimony and documentation.
A grand jury report is not factual.
It goes into great detail about widespread sexual abuse and cover-up within the Catholic Church. Nothing I can say in the time we have together today will do full justice to the 2 years of work done by these grand jurors.
This is hearsay.
Dozens of witnesses testified before the grand jury, detailing acts of sexual abuse by priests and how senior church officials covered up their criminal conduct, prioritizing their institution over the safety and welfare of these young boys and girls.
Yes, we have to get the guilty, but we must protect the innocent. There are too many priests and bishops who I'm afraid are going to get sundered because someone's going to drop a dime and they're going to say, well, something happened to me. He groped me in 1965 or something.
The grand jury subpoenaed and reviewed 500,000 pages of documents. These documents from the diocese's own secret archives formed the backbone of this investigation, corroborating accounts of victims and illustrating the organized cover-up by senior church officials that stretched, in some cases, all the way to the Vatican.
Will Shapiro ever go after the public schools? Why are we being set up? This is cherry picking.
The grand jury isn't singling you out. They investigated leads that your organization has systematically covered up child rape and largely gotten away with it while claiming the moral high ground. People are rightfully pissed, and the ease with which you shrug it off is quite frankly disgusting.
You mention in your grand jury debunking release that no one was found guilty of anything. No one, Bill?
Right. Almost nobody. Quite frankly, let's put it this way. Nobody got a chance to rebut it.
Nobody got a chance to rebut it? You're acting like they're the victims here. They didn't get a chance to rebut it because there was no trial against them. Why was there no trial against them? Because the church swept it under the rug until the statute of limitations had passed. And rather than fighting for justice, the church is lobbying against action that would remove the statute of limitations and allow these cases to stand trial. Nobody's saying that all priests are rapists, but that's why people are outraged.
While the list of priests is long, we don't think we got them all. We feel certain that many victims never came forward and that the diocese did not create written records every single time they heard something about abuse.
They're saying 300 priests, not all of them are priests. I'm thinking the figure might be closer to 150, but we'll never know.
As shocking as that number is, the grand jury report notes that the jurors didn't automatically name every priest mentioned in the documents and the secret archives. They actually received files on more than 400 priests, but were careful not to name names if the information was too scanty to make a reasonable determination about what had happened.
I don't want falsehoods out there. People are saying this is going on today. Let me tell you something. The reforms issued by the bishops in 2002 are working.
But is that true?
But in the months that followed, Keating found some church leaders still clung to secrecy. In Los Angeles, home to the largest archdiocese in America, Cardinal Roger Mahoney was fighting a pitched legal battle to keep personnel records of accused priests out of the hands of prosecutors.
The reforms issued by the bishops in 2002 are working.
There are paedophiles in the community, which the Roman Catholic Church has identified, has evidence about, yet has not handed that information over to the police or law enforcement authorities.
The reforms issued by the bishops in 2002 are working.
Germany's justice minister wants the church to cooperate more with state authorities on abuse allegations. That prompted an angry response from church leaders.
The reforms issued by the bishops in 2002 are working.
The Vatican has reports on more than 4,000 cases of sex abuse by priests and nuns against minors. But they refuse to release details of what they are.
The reforms issued by the bishops in 2002 are working.
The church is lobbying for the statute of limitations not to pass. I think that has to end. They have to lobby to help survivors, not to fight them.
Let me tell you something. The reforms issued by the bishops in 2002 are working.
O'Malley told Nora O'Donnell in 2014 the church took sex abuse complaints seriously.
Certainly the Holy Father is very, very aware of that and very committed to zero tolerance and responding in a proper way.
Ramsey, now a pastor in New York City, wrote a letter in June 2015 to Cardinal Sean O'Malley, who had just been appointed by Pope Francis to lead a commission to protect children from sex abuse. Ramsey wrote, "Some of these stories were not presented to me as mere rumors, but were told to me by persons directly involved."
The response that I got was from his secretary, which said that this really does not fall under our jurisdiction.
If that's working, then I would hate to see what broken is.
Everybody knows that Cardinal McCarrick, he's no longer a cardinal. All these allegations against him, there's a lot of evidence there. Okay, let's assume he is guilty, all right? How do we know he's guilty? Do people realize this because Cardinal Dolan turned him in? Do they realize that?
But let's take a look at Bill's shining example of Catholic transparency. In 2012, the New York Times revealed that Dolan paid up to $20,000 to abusive priests to step down as priests rather than go through the expensive and public process of defrocking them. In the meantime, these abusive priests were still taking full salaries, prompting the survivors network of those abused by priests to respond with the following statement. In what other occupation, especially one working with families and operating schools and youth programs, is an employee given a cash bonus for raping and sexually assaulting children? But oh wait, let's not forget that in 2011, Bill sided with the church again, calling this organization that has helped survivors of abuse by clergy for decades a phony victims group. And Dolan thanked him for the statement. But it gets worse. In 2013, it was revealed that Dolan sent a letter to the Vatican requesting permission to move $57 million worth of church money to protect it from lawsuit claims by victims of abuse by priests. Is the Catholic Church really concerned about transparency and justice, or do they care more about avoiding scandals and protecting their coffers?
This is not going on in 2018.
Literally this week, NBC published a letter from the Vatican's former ambassador to the US that claimed that the Pope himself helped to cover up Cardinal McCarrick's history of sex abuse.
There are 30 pedophiles running around in very high positions in Pennsylvania or outside of Pennsylvania. You don't get 30 names redacted out of a Supreme Court ruling unless you're powerful, unless you've got some kind of pull.
In the case of the molesting priest, almost all of them were homosexuals. So you've got to look at it that way.
Let's imagine that we can overlook this and say it is nothing whatever to do with the structure and nature of the Catholic Church and the twisted, neurotic and hysterical way that its leaders are chosen. The celibacy, the nuns, the monks, the priesthood. This is not natural and normal, ladies and gentlemen, in 2009. It really isn't. I'm sorry. For me to be called a pervert by these extraordinarily sexually dysfunctional people, I don't think human history's ever had more.
Who to believe me, a priest in 1948 or 47 would abuse you? Would do that? Never heard of such a thing because they covered it up.
Let's not worry about World War II. I want to find out what's going on in the seminaries today. Why, if there is a homosexual subculture that's still going on, and no doubt there is, it's going on in Rome. We all know what's going on in Rome. It's not just in the United States. But of course there's a subculture, and that has to be busted.
It's the strange thing about this church. It is obsessed with sex. Absolutely obsessed. Now they will say, we with our permissive society and our rude jokes are obsessed. No, we have a healthy attitude. We like it. It's fun, it's jolly, because it's a primary impulse. It can be dangerous and dark and difficult. It's a bit like food in that respect, only even more exciting. The only people who are obsessed with food are anorexics and the morbidly obese. And that, in erotic terms, is the Catholic Church in a nutshell.
We saw an outgrowth of this report this week, an act of violence against a priest in Indiana, a Byzantine Catholic priest. He was beaten before Mass. The abusers who came into the sacristy said, "This is for all the kids," they yelled at him. Do you fear more violence like this? And what is the answer here, Bill?
Well, I've certainly got my share of threats, I'll tell you that.
Why am I not surprised?
The person responsible, obviously, is the assailant. But secondary responsibility, or at least tertiary, has to go to those people who are the Catholic haters. I'm talking about the Catholic suing lawyers and the Catholic hating activists.
Did you seriously just place blame for the assault and battery of a priest on lawyers who sue for the justice of children raped by priests? Unbelievable. Look, I fall in the activist category, but as an atheist and secular activist, I can assure you, Bill, we don't hate Catholics. We hate people who cover up child rape, rape apologists, and people who try to whitewash history to avoid scandal and protect the faith rather than protecting children from rapists. That said, as an activist, I have never, ever condoned or called for violence against anyone, nor has any other secular humanist activist that I know of. I do, however, encourage all Catholics to quit the corrupt organization and stop donating to a church that uses the funds to protect pedophile priests.
Until this Pope turns over all the documents and all the names, all the offenders to whom they know are offenders and are in ministry, and turn them over to law enforcement across the globe, nothing seems to change. There is some words, there is some seeming action by the creation of a commission, but words and commissions don't protect kids.
I think it's a mistake for the bishops to open up their books to anybody unless one condition is met. You tell me, Attorney General, you tell me, District Attorney, that you're not just going to cherry pick the Catholic Church, that you're also going to demand that the public schools and the Jewish schools and the Protestant schools and everybody else will open up their books, and then we'll do so. Otherwise, we are subverting the church in the name of justice.
Why don't they go after schools? There's been testimony after testimony of clerical sex abuse and widespread cover-up by the Catholic Church. This is the equivalent of a smoking gun. You can dangle that red herring all you want, Bill, but saying the Catholic Church shouldn't open its records unless the public schools do would be like saying that police shouldn't be granted a search warrant for the house with human blood gushing out from under the front door until they get a search warrant for the local museum first.
This isn't the janitor from some elementary school that got the Supreme Court to pull his name. You don't get 30 names redacted out of a Supreme Court ruling unless you're powerful, unless you've got some kind of pull.
Well, the bishops are already pledging to work with law enforcement. I mean, you mentioned a moment ago a bishop who turned over a malefactor. Don't you think that's a good idea?
No, I don't think it's a good idea. You don't ever make public the accused.
How can this church say it has any moral superiority? It has difficulty catching up to what ordinary people regard as common moral and ethical sense.
And there you have it, ladies and germs. That's how you whitewash a child rape scandal. If you're feeling particularly outraged and would like a positive outlet to channel your rage, I've set up a fundraiser on GoFundMe for the Survivors Network of Those Abused by Priests. You know, the organization that exposes pedophile priests and provides resources to survivors that Bill Donahue called a phony victims group. I'll be sending the funds courtesy of Bill Donahue. Bill. There's no hard feelings here. I just hope this organization bankrupts your corrupt church and that survivors of sex abuse receive the justice and healing that they deserve. Thanks everyone for watching. Share this video to make sure that we reach our fundraising goal, and don't drink the Catholic Kool-Aid. Now go donate your dollars. It is tax deductible. No more Catholic Church. No more Catholic Church. Bankrupt the Catholic Church. No more Catholic Church. Doobadoo.